This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate third part of What If Kid Naruto Was Raised by a Legendary Monk. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Now, wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Dusk was drawing in, and it was growing darker in the forest. Jado and Anko were running through the forest in a fury, searching for any indications of their target. Because it was getting close to dusk, the Kunoichi was worried about tracking down the murderer. Unexpectedly keeping up with her pace, Jado said, "Anko.Han, you know the bastard better than I do. Any idea why he's here and impersonating an examinee?" She shook her head, aware that he was able to tell even though she didn't think he saw it. She jumped over a branch and said, "I have no idea, it's been years since I've last seen the bastard. It doesn't really matter though, he's become an S-rank noob. Nin since he's fled the village. I'm going to kill him and end his madness once and for all." They walked in silence until Jado passed her and turned to face the other way. "This way," he gave the order as he started moving once more. "Are you sure he's this way?" "Not really, but trust me on this." "Is this some kind of weird monk stuff?" "I'll tell you some other, that is a big snake." Anko said, "Yeah it is," glancing at the enormous snake on the ground with its skull crushed in. Glancing back over her shoulder, she said, "This is one of his summons. The bastard is near," as Jado scanned the area. "Who do you think did this?" She turned back to face the snake and saw Jado standing next to its head. Putting a hand on it, he said, "Looks like Naruto did this. Judging by how its head is smashed, it was done by with a blunt weapon. I could be wrong, but I'm not with signs of the kid being here." Anko could feel a tiny twinge of pride rising in her heart at the thought of the young monk killing such a creature as she turned to face the snake. She was hunting what could be the most dangerous game, so she was a predator on the hunt, so she was sadly unable to enjoy it. She looked over at the man she was with and saw that he had his head cocked to one side, giving a barely perceptible nod to an invisible speaker. The Jonin asked as she walked by his side, "What is it?" Jado said, "He went this way," and ran off once more. Since he had already led her to a good lead, the Jonin was compelled to follow him once more in case he did so again. "Look, not that I don't appreciate the help that has been provided thus far," she said, matching his pace. "But why are you doing this really? This hasn't got anything to do with you. The bastard is on a whole other level. He was once considered a candidate for the title of Hokage." He glanced at her and said, "I'm here for you, the kid, and Gramps," before tossing over a branch. If Anko was going to be honest, it was the first time he had called her by name without using that damned honorific. She also knew that he was more serious than before about the situation. "Anko, if something happens to you, they'd be sad, and even though we haven't known each other for long, but I like you. You have spunk and I like that." She threw a kunai at him, but he turned her over to the other side while grinning. "Besides, if you die, I lose out on a fun puzzle to solve. That's the spirit." She growled, "So all I am to you is a project," as more kunai fell into her hands. He abruptly said, "Anko.Han, everyone is a puzzle to be solved," as he stopped in another clearing. "Looks like the kid was here too. Just take a look at the signs. He fell here, alive, but was carried off by a tiger, how odd." "You can tell all that just by looking?" she asked, taking in the sights while watching for their intended victim. As much as Anko knew that both of them wanted to check on Naruto, she also knew that they couldn't. "Yeah, the kid lost, but he should be fine. I hope he is. The wildlife is one of the risks that were included in the scenario, and the exam is still ongoing." The bastard went up to the canopy in the pink-haired girl came down here and collected the kid's hat and shikuho. Looks like she was also carrying some extra weight, seems to be the other teammate was incapacitated. She came down after the tiger came, probably was tending to who was closer at the time and needed more attention. The Jonin barked. "What is it?" Anko balled her hands up. "The Haruno girl has a crush on the Uchiha boy. It's pretty well known that she and a few other girls in the village are crazy about him. She most likely ignored him." The man lowered himself to a spot and shook his head. They started moving again, deeper into the darkening forest as they thought to themselves. "See this here, they're tears. She lamented over losing Naruto," he said, looking up. "We should move on, staying here won't do any good." Before they stopped again, it wouldn't be much longer. Anko growled, her seal acting up more than it had previously and starting to really irritate her. "What now?" she hissed. He fixed his gaze on a tree, and she saw what he saw when she looked at it. That day, the kunoichi who had been killed melted into the trunk of a huge tree. Her cursed seal of heaven made it immediately clear to her who it was. The Konoha.nin squinted at the person she had once admired and loved. Orochimaru. My, how have you grown, Anko? Chan. Who might that young man with you be? The person said with a laugh. As kunai slid into Anko's waiting hands, she was ready to throw them, but Jado's hand on her shoulder stopped her. She shot him a furious look and saw that he was turning his head away from their intended target. He muttered, clever bastards, low enough for her to hear. Her eyes grew wide as she realized what was happening and said, careful, remember that there were 3 bodies and 3 went in. Folding his arms into his sleeves, Jado returned his focus to Orochimaru. My name is Jado, Wandering Scholar. It is a pleasure to meet you, Orochimaru. Orochimaru laughed patronizingly. Oh, so you're a man of knowledge, are you? What knowledge do you seek? Jado narrowed his eyes and said, not the kind that would damn my humanity. Anko returned her focus to their intended target. Tell me, did you plant your seal on Anko before or after your change? Oh, and what makes you say that? Orochimaru narrowed his own eyes at Anko, who was clearly confused and not understanding what Jado was asking. The shocked Kunoichi's eyes widened. You're part demon. You reek of one who gave up his humanity for quick power. Your stench is foul, too foul to be truly human anymore. The killer said, it was long before Anko Chan became my little tool, and pulled away from the trunk. I devoured the heart of a snake demon back when I first began my pursuit for immortality. Sadly, gaining the power of a demon didn't mean I became immortal, just stronger. Your seal of heaven is part of that research? The Sennin licked his lips and said, oh yes it is, and I just gave one very beautiful boy my gift. He seems quite exceptional and possesses what I need to become God. Something that Anko Chan lacked. Anko's blood froze, knowing exactly who he was referring to. She knew what the man was looking for. The goal of his life was to master every jutsu known to man, but only one forest boy possessed the resources to fulfill his dream. Anko roared. Uchiha Sasuke, as she got ready to throw her knives. You're here for more than him though. I know you too well that you wouldn't risk coming to the village just for that. You're here to assassinate Hokage Sama, aren't you? Orochimaru laughed again, finding humor in the circumstances. Why, Anko Chan, I lack the proper manpower to pull off such a plan. I'm here to recruit exceptional ninja to aid me. The younger man said, your gift will turn them to your side, but Anko could tell he was interested because of her own situation. She was aware that he was presumably trying to find out more about Orochimaru as well as her seal. Orochimaru then brushed off his pants and said, why, her gift was the very first of many, not everything was worked out. Well, it's been fun chatting, but I have places to be and plots to unleash. Benazato, Shijima, take care of these pests for me, why don't you? Jado shoved Anko aside before she could respond, causing her to fall to a lower branch. Glancing up, she saw that Orochimaru had vanished in a cloud of smoke and that Jado was using a shikuho that he had suddenly drawn to repel one genin that had entered with Orochimaru, while the other genin was where she had been. Anko saw 2 genin bodies bulge and then change into what could only be described as demons. They both had long, clawed arms and resembled snakes. The only difference was that one had a cobra-like hood and grayish scales, while the other was as red as blood. Anko felt like this was so surreal. Anko could only utter, oh fuck, as her eyes grew wide. It was certainly not demons, of all the things she was expecting to be facing. As the violence caused by the 2 demons' attack snapped the branch that Jado was on, her instincts took over. Snakes shot from her sleeves and snagged the man's ankle as he fell past, observing that he was struggling with one of the 2 snakes. The red one he was struggling with shot down to the forest floor and crashed as a result of the abrupt stop. The gray demon charged at Jado as Anko swung her to a different branch. She dropped off the other side of the branch, realizing she had to move. Jado rose past her as she fell, and he grinned at her as he went by. Sensing that Jado was presently fending off the other demon up top and leaving the other to her, she let go of her snakes and descended to the ground. The red one quickly approached her, demonstrating its strength after collapsing to the earth. It's to the Kunoichi. I am Benazato of the Kimin Devils, and swung a clawed hand. Your soul is mine, mortal. Anko whirled away from the claw strike and struck Benazato with her own kunai, which grazed the demon's scales. She yelled, you'll have to work for it, bitch, as her anxiety started to subside. She had never engaged in combat with a demon before. They were uncommon and nearly always resulted in defeat for those who engaged in combat with them. Anko continued to dance around and attack, but her knives were useless, so she moved away and started creating seals for a jutsu. When the demon realized what the kunoichi was doing, it tried to attack her again, but was thwarted when the girl flipped over it and released flames from her mouth. Flames engulfed the demon until Anko was certain there was no movement within the inferno. She approached the charred husk of the demon and kicked it, puncturing the skin with her foot. She yelled, "Cast off skin," as the earth beneath her burst apart. She was blinded by debris that blew into her face, but she was spared a deadly blow when the demon snipped its maw at her. She ducked under the demon as it flew over her body. Benisato was unprepared for the move and fell onto her back, tripping over her body. Anko stabbed Benisato in the eye, driving the blade all the way to the demon's brain, before it could react. It let out an unearthly shriek of pain and rage and died in a spasm. Anko, having momentarily caught her breath, looked up to see the other demon fall to the ground a short distance from her. Even though it was motionless, Jado continued to follow it as it descended and used his shikuho to smash its head in. Jado asked, averting his gaze from his kill, "You okay, Anko?" The staff disappeared as he slid it into one of his coat sleeves. "Yeah, it's the bitch's blood, not mine," she said, blinking at the action because it was really strange to see. The man nodded briefly before he sighed. "What's wrong?" He turned to face the trees and said, "Bastard got away." She lost track of anything he said as the pain intensified from the seal around her neck. Everything seemed to fade away. The forest, the demons, the blood covering her, and only she remained. Everything had vanished. All around her was destroyed and she was cut by those words. Then Enko went to her knees, but she was caught by Jado just in time. The last thing she saw before darkness took hold of her was the obvious worry on Jado's face, along with something else she was unable to fully see. Sakura put a damp rag on top of Sasuke's forehead and said, "I wish that I could take us to one of the gates." She saw Slime sitting next to her in the hollowed dot-out tree that she had discovered, and he was always grinning, even in the dark. "But it's too dangerous for us to travel." She knew that traveling at this time would only lead to trouble, and there wasn't much she could have done with Naruto gone and Sasuke feverish. Sakura was not as shrewd or strong as her two teammates, but she was sufficiently knowledgeable about the fundamentals. "I have to keep you both safe, for Naruto." Turning to her side, she peered down at her teammates' trademark items, the ruined hat and the now.1 ringed shikuho. Even though it had only been a few hours since their encounter, she was still in excruciating pain and was having difficulty controlling her tears. She took the hat and covered her head with it before draping the shikuho over her knees. She couldn't help but feel doubt in her feelings for her crush when she looked back down at him. Even though Sasuke knew the man was only interested in their lives, he left Naruto by himself to battle the man. She turned back to face Slime and said, "Go to sleep, I'll watch over us tonight and make sure that we're safe." Slime gave her a nod and did something unexpected. It leapt into her lap. A moment of annoyance flared up before she squashed it. Slime was one of Naruto's friends who the monk had abandoned when the tiger arrived. She moved the shikuho back to her side and gently stroked the little blue creature while humming a gentle lullaby that her mother had sung to her. She stayed up until dawn tending to the strange creature and finding solace in its company. She was on the verge of losing it all when one of her teammates passed away and the other developed a fever. She glanced down at Sasuke, worried to see that there was light, and then she looked at Slime. She leaned over the beast, pulled the rag off Sasuke's head, splashed it with fresh water, and put it back on. She nodded off and shook herself awake, aware that even though she was tired, she couldn't let herself go to sleep just yet because doing so could result in their deaths and she had a mission to complete. Before she heard the faint tap of something moving, she thought, "I will get us out of here, even if it's the last thing that I do." She drew a kunai and turned to face the source after suddenly becoming alert. A squirrel. The squirrel observed her from a distance before approaching her. As she saw where it was headed, she threw a kunai at it. It came to a halt before racing into the forest. She made sure the rodent fled before going back to keeping an eye on Sasuke and Slime. But Slime was wide awake now that she had taken drastic measures to stop it. A mocking voice said, "You've been up all night, haven't you?" Which surprised Sakura. She turned around quickly and drew a new kunai when she saw the Otogakure no Sato team. "If you'd please, wake up Sasuke for us. Once you do that, you can take a break. We only want to have a talk with him." The Konoha.nin gasped when he saw their Ates after surveying them. Fear gripping her, she didn't want to take on 3 ninja who were ready for her in her exhausted state. What are you talking about? I know that Orochimaru is pulling the strings here, so what do you want? He felt a little more confident when she used the name because it didn't seem like they were expecting her to know that. What does this mark on Sasuke's neck mean? Either way, Sasuke.kun is in no condition to fight you now. Get out of here and leave us be. The Otto.nin refused to give up. The one with the bandage thought, I wonder what Orochimaru-sama is up to. His teammate with the spiky hair said, whatever, I can't turn my back after hearing that, while fixing Sakura in his gaze. He started to move, but stopped when the ninja with the bandaged face told him to stop, saying, I'll kill both you and your precious Sasuke.kun too. Why? Zaku, she's been setting traps, he said, bending to pick some grass out of the ground. As Sakura met his lone eye, she felt fear begin to ensnare her heart. What's the point of laying these traps if you leave the signs of one that'll warn your prey? She's an amateur, exclaimed the Zaku, who had since been identified. She only threw the kunai to keep the rat from springing it then. Bandage Face gave the order, yeah, though she is of no use to us, so let's eliminate her first, as the 3 of them leapt into the air. Sakura grinned as her kunai sliced through a wire behind her as soon as they reached the peak of their jump. Sadly for Sakura, the log she used exploded, allowing the Nins to come after her. A massive log swung down at the 3 Nins. You're such a no talent who should have worked harder. A green blur yelled, Konoha Senpu, as he kicked the 3 Nins out of the way. Lee was standing in front of Sakura. As you should have as well. As he stood up, the Nin leader exclaimed, who the hell are you? Why am I Konoha's gorgeous green beast? Lee uttered while assuming a combat stance and bearing the squirrel on his shoulder that Sakura had previously identified. My name is Rock Lee. With her hand reaching for Naruto's Shikuho, Sakura asked, why are you here? As she fixed her gaze on Lee's back. Lee put the rodent down on the ground, not looking at her. I came because I will always be there for you for when you need me. She wiped away the tear that had formed in her eye as she glanced over Sasuke. Taking the Shikuho in her hands and standing up. Thanks for the help, Lee. She must have found that strange, as they had only met the day before. I promised when we met, did I not? That I would protect you until I die. She ignored the strange feelings she was having for Sasuke, even though they were bothering her. This wasn't the moment to think about herself. Sakura laughed when she saw how content he appeared to be following that remark. Zaku, please accept this, the team leader said, tossing a scroll to his colleague. They're as good as dead. Sakura tensed, ready to counterattack if he were to get past Lee after noticing that he had moved. The kunoichi threw a kunai at him as he got closer, making him jump into the air and lunge at Lee. The boy in green clothes punched the earth with his fist. Sakura was so shocked to see Lee pull up a large root and halt the enemy leader's attack that she yelled, what the hell? She observed how much more of a mismatch his battle with Sasuke was and thought, he's so strong. I have witnessed your attacks, Lee said, raising the root above his head. His opponent leapt back to get some distance, and as he did so, Lee started taking off the bandages from his arms, thinking that he would be wasting his time dodging like they were real. The leader moved in to attack once more, but Lee disappeared and reappeared beneath him, sending the Nin hurtling through the air with a kick. Lee quickly followed, wrapping his bandages around the Nin. When they reached the peak of their climb, the Konoha.nin grabbed hold of his opponent and started spinning back down toward the ground, saying, take this. Omet Renge. At the last moment, Lee leapt away, causing the Nin to be driven headfirst into the ground. Unfortunately, despite this, the genin managed to walk away from it. Hey, looks like I made it Dosu, Zaku said, attracting Sakura's attention. She noticed that his hands were buried in the ground, and that the ground appeared to have been pushed upwards from them to where his teammate landed. Yay, thanks, Dosu said, pulling back his sleeve to reveal his arm covered in gauntlets. It's my turn now. Launching himself at Lee again, he was able to get close when the Konoha.nin awkwardly sidestepped, but Lee still went down to his knees. Sakura, who was standing close to Sasuke and Slime, called out his name as the fight progressed, tightening her grip on Naruto's Shikuho. It's your turn now, girlie. It will take some time for you to get up. With a stance that brought back memories of Naruto using the Shikuho, Sakura readied herself, She had never really practiced with one before, but the extra reach would be useful in fighting them. That device on his arm must be part of his trick, she thought, trying to decipher Dosu's technique, but bracing herself to cover for Lee should he need it. Stupid, Dosu muttered as he watched Lee struggle against his arm. This gauntlet amplifies sound waves to the utmost limits, and I can use my chakra to direct the sound however I want. The Auto.Nin didn't take long to lunge at her again, but he was stopped once again by a green blur. This time Dosu was ready for Lee and blocked the taijutsu combo, countering with his own attack that Lee could hardly block. After that, Lee fell to the ground, unmoving yet groaning. Now to finish off this bug, Dosu didn't get the chance as Sakura was in his face just as he was about to bring his fist down upon Lee. The Auto.Nin grunted as he blocked the Shikuho with his gauntlet. Not bad. When Sakura got to her knees, someone grabbed hold of her hair and said, "You got lovely hair," the third Auto.Nin said, standing over Sakura. Trying to be a sexy kunoichi when you should have been training? Sakura was blown away the next thing she knew. Rolling over the ground, she stopped, the Shikuho in her hands. "You are a disgrace to all ninjas. Why don't you bring the Uchiha outside and murder him in front of her, Zaku?" Observing her response to it will be entertaining. "I'm too weak," Sakura thought, her hands grabbing at the dirt in frustration. "I'm the one who is always being protected, always in the way, and always the burden." She closed her eyes as Zaku started to approach Sasuke, but her eyes snapped open as she pulled out a kunai. Those words caused Sakura to freeze and release Naruto's weapon. "That's not gonna work on me, pig," the girl behind her remarked in jest. Sakura could only snicker as she raised her kunai and sliced through her long hair, releasing herself from the enemy's hold. She dropped the small blade, picked up the Shikuho again, and stood up this time. Turning to face the girl, she felt the kunoichi tackle her. Sakura could imagine the look of surprise on the other girl's face, expecting her to have made a move like that. As she reappeared to one side of the clearing, Sakura thought that one must specialize in ranged attacks. He saw her, and as he aimed his palms at her, a blast of wind shot towards her. Sakura then substituted herself to the other side of Zaku, and did so again as he followed her, reappearing above him with the Shikuho raised, ready to strike. Zaku followed her again, this time hurling a kunai at her, grazing her, but he looked away, thinking she had pulled a prank. This time, he had barely had time to block the metal staff. He had his other hand up and another blast of wind shot forth and knocked Sakura back. Prepared, she flew up and prepared to charge Zaku when all of a sudden Dosu was in her face with his fist. He was too close for her to block, and with that gauntlet of his, it meant trouble for her. Sakura pulled the Shikuho back and swung again, grazing his chest as he leapt back. "Bitch," Zaku whispered as he dove toward her, thinking that she would be simple to defeat by now. However, Dosu's maneuver did not render her defenseless. Instead, she was too close to swing the staff, so she fell to the ground and stepped into his stomach. Sakura was pleased to see the air leave his body, rolling away and springing back to her feet, ready to face them once more. "That should do it," the enemy kunoichi said as she eventually joined the fight. Sakura looked over at her before hearing a bell. Her world distorted as nausea overtook her. She fell to her knees. Sensing a threat, she sidestepped two needles that were aimed at her. The next thing she knew, she was under attack from the one going by the name of Zaku. She knew that he was enjoying the fact that she was being beaten for what she had done. Pain was all she knew, there and controlling her thoughts, until a voice broke through the clearing and said, "I can't stand this anymore." At that point, Zaku stopped beating her. Lee's teammates, she thought to herself as she tried to get a better look at them. Through her haze, she could see Neji, the guy Naruto told her was Hinata's cousin and his teammate, standing over the clearing on a branch. She heard her attacker mutter, "Stupid rats," coming out, as he gave her a brief moment of peace. Neji looked down at the Auto.Nins and said, "See that annoying guy over there? He's our teammate, and you're going to pay for what you did. Before I give you everything I have, stop while you can." He trailed off, looking around him in an attempt to find something. "Why don't you do something about it if you don't like it?" Dosu asked, preparing for battle. Sakura watched him occasionally glance at his gauntlet, and as she did, she couldn't help but feel proud of herself for having destroyed it and put an end to his trick. "If you know how a trick works, it's useless," she recalled Kakashi telling her team during that C-rank mission. "Some ninjas are solely dependent on a single trick. If it's discovered, they're as good as dead." "From the looks of it, I won't have to," Neji said as she dropped to her knees. She heard a groan and turned to see what was happening. She saw smoke rising from Sasuke's body and was happy to see him awake. But her happiness quickly vanished when she saw the hatred in his eyes and the strange black marks covering his body. "Sakura, who did that to you?" Sasuke asked her, eyeing the other people in the clearing. While she remained silent, Zaku responded, "It was us." The Uchiha turned to face the Oto nins. At last, she managed to speak, "Sasuke, your body." The Uchiha assured her not to worry. "I feel overwhelming power flowing through me," as he cast a glance down at his hands. "It has a wonderful feeling. That man gave it to me." Sakura felt her heart tighten as she watched Zaku fly, destroying the hollowed dot-out tree and leaving nothing behind as the smoke from the explosion subsided. "If I have to make a deal with the devil, then I must if it means that I gain the power needed to become an Avenger," he said, ignoring her worried expression. The Auto.Nin said, "Hey, I blew him away," and then froze. Sasuke was next to him, and he backhanded the Auto.Nin across the clearing. As soon as Zaku stood up again, he was hit by several fireballs. He sent another blast of wind, dispelling the fire, only to find that each ball contained a shuriken. 2 of the flying blades stabbed him, and the others only slightly hurt him. Zaku was helpless, though, since Sasuke was on top of him, both arms held behind his back, and the Uchiha's foot was on his back. Sakura was terrified by the dark, demonic expression on Sasuke's face. "So you're proud of your arms," the cursed boy said, applying more pressure to his captive's arms and back. "Let's see how proud you are after this." A loud snap shook the clearing, and Sakura could only imagine how much worse Zaku's already broken arm was after that trauma. The boy was so overcome with pain that he passed out. Then there were 2. Sasuke turned to the 2 Auto nins who had recoiled from his stare alone. "I hope that you're both more of a challenge than he was." Sakura lost it. This was not her teammate, or at least she didn't think he was, but she knew he had never behaved in such a way before. She threw herself at him, encircling his chest as she gave him a backhand hug. "Stop it," she sobbed, tears streaming down her cheeks. At any other moment, she would have enjoyed having him in her arms, but that was not right now. She was scared and she didn't want him to keep driving her insane. Observing that he turned back to face her with his dujutsu, Sakura muttered, "Please, please stop." She must have been successful in her pleas because he relaxed and the black marks on his body vanished. She felt his body slake in her arms and then carefully lowered Sasuke to the ground. Dosu interrupted Sakura as she was thinking about her teammate, saying, "You're strong. We have no chance of defeating you as you are now." Taking that as an agreement, Dosu carefully walked over to Zaku and lifted him up after taking the scroll out of his teammate's pouch and tossing it over to both Sasuke and Sakura. "We'll let you go for now, but next time we'll stay and fight." The boy in her arms grunted, and she could tell that he was smirking despite his condition. Sakura cried out, "Wait, who is Orochimaru?" As the Auto nins started to walk away to tend to their wounds. How could he have hurt Sasuke? The Auto nins then withdrew into the forest, and Dosu turned to face Zaku and his other teammate, saying, "I don't know, we were only following orders." Sakura wasn't sure what was going on, but it felt like they were really being ordered and had no idea what was going on. "What happened to me?" she heard Sasuke ask, and her thoughts turned to her crush and what had happened. How utterly wrong it was for her, how dark and cold he was, and how utterly wrong it was, before the memory of the fight finally caught up. Sakura dropped Sasuke in the middle of helping him up and darted back towards the tree that she was using as cover. She looked frantically around the wreckage that was once the tree, realizing that she wasn't alone and that it was likely her other charge had vanished after that massive attack that her crush had evaded. Flinging rocks and sticks to the side, she found Naruto's splintered hat, fear filling her body again, dread seizing her, not wanting to see what might be under the hat, but knowing that she had to. Without much thinking, she lifted the hat, ignoring those around her, and saying, "Slime," as she found the bruised and battered creature that smiled up at her. Grabbing it, she brought it up to her face and hugged it while sobbing with happiness. Sakura dropped to her knees, relieved that Naruto's friend was okay, as it rubbed against her face. That was when Lee's voice shattered her heart. "I see that you are okay, Sakura-san." When she turned around and saw Lee, who appeared to be in disarray, being helped by his Kunoichi teammate, she grinned and said, "Thank you for your help, Lee, you really came through." The older boy turned to face the ground and said, "Sakura-san, you should be praising Sasuke-kun. He is the one who drove the Auto.Nin away. I am unworthy of such praise. Sakura.san. The Konoha lotus blooms twice. It seems that those of the Uchiha clan have been granted great and incredible power. Sakura sensed Sasuke's approach and could tell that he was taken aback by the statement, but his infamous smirk replaced it with pride in his victory over Lee. I'll be a better man the next time we cross paths. I assure you of that. She nodded, touched by his kind words and grinning, yes. After that, both Lee and his team were gone, heading off somewhere else into the forest to continue with the exam. Their exit though, despite Lee's exuberance, fell on Sakura's deaf ears as she turned her attention back to Slime, holding it closer to her being, not wanting to lose anyone else at the moment. Sasuke was fine, he was up and about, but Slime, it was a frail creature and it kept her company throughout the night. Much better company than Sasuke ever was. Shush, we'll make it out of here and get you back home. Sakura, we're not giving up. Sasuke interrupted her peaceful thoughts, and she noticed him towering over her. Where is the Dobi? Sensing her feelings, Slime rubbed against her face and smiled that same happy smile it always had plastered on its face. Taking a breath, she schooled emotions and said, he's gone, Sasuke. She knew that Sasuke was going to ask this, and she's been preparing herself all night long as she kept watch. However, her voice was stuck in her throat. She looked down at the ground, ashamed of what had happened. Before I could help Naruto, a tiger came and took him after the man finished what he had done to you. When Sasuke saw the hat and the shikuho, he became enraged and shocked, and the kunoichi could only assume that he was hoping it wasn't true. That's not the Dobi's stupid stick, is it? She could only nod, her heart tightening at the disdain for their departed teammate. Why is it only one ring? Must be a stupid monk thing then, she said, explaining that she had no idea why two of the rings had vanished after she picked it up. Glancing down at the kunoichi, she could feel his disapproval of the circumstance. We're going to continue, she said. Sakura, please discard that item and hand me the hat. Sakura was astounded by those remarks, which felt like a kick to the gut. But Sasuke, we can't continue without Naruto. It is now our duty to fulfill our obligation to Naruto by returning Slime and his belongings to his grandfather. We can and we will, the shinobi growled, his eyes blazing with rage. I won't be disqualified because the Dobi killed himself. He died because he was weak. His fury turned towards Slime, and Sakura backed away from him, clutching Slime tighter to her. This wasn't the boy who she had a crush on, and it was breaking her heart even further. Sasuke made a hand. Seal that Sakura was very familiar with, but it wasn't one she's seen the boy use before. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Sasuke was on his knees, gasping for air when a lone Uchiha clone materialized in a cloud of smoke. Transform into the Dobi and take his hat and stick. We're moving on. I will leave you behind and leave you to your fate in this forest if you do not follow my instructions. Sakura silently watched the clone turn into Naruto, tears streaming down her face at the sight of the familiar whisker face, but it was all Sasuke while wearing the monk's face. She watched it pick up the shikuho, and a new ring appeared. Has some weight to it, it said, using Naruto's voice, but it wasn't. The kunoichi found it odd that the clone struggled to pick it up. She wasn't sure how much more her heart could clench at the sight of the obvious disregard for their teammate. Good, the original said, gasping in relief. He extended his hand to grab Slime, and a loud smack echoed through the clearing. Sakura slapped her crush's hand away, fury blazing in her soul at the bastard's mockery of Naruto's sacrifice. Don't you dare lay your selfish, cowardly hands on Slime, Sakura yelled, slapping away her crush's hand. Her anger didn't lessen even as she flinched at the sight of the rage blazing in his eyes, his dujutsu active and spinning menacingly as he looked down at her. You bastard, you only care about your own promotion and not what, she said, not finishing as Sasuke slapped her face, the blow so great that in her weary body, she fell to the side, her grip on Slime loosening only slightly before hitting the ground. He growled and reached for her again, saying, how dare you, you bitch! This is the thanks that I get for saving you, pathetic excuse of a ninja. When Lee was unable to drive those cowards away, I did. I am here, I am strong, I am an elite Uchiha. Sakura growled, I'm not some weak kunoichi, and turned to face his clone, who held her in place. I tended to Slime and you after what happened, even after I kept the auto. Nins at bay long enough for you to recuperate, all you managed to do was severely hurt one of them while I was up all night keeping watch over you. You only engaged in one battle, not all three, and as soon as they realized you were prepared for a fight, they withdrew. You were fresh, they weren't. So Lee and I held them off. I am strong, and I did more to them than Lee did, so don't you dare get all high and mighty on me." She could tell that was a slap in the face because he flinched and growled before striking her face. The boy snapped, bringing his fist back, "Don't you ever talk back to me. Now where is that thing?" Sakura was so stunned by the blow that she was unable to comprehend what her former crush was saying. All she knew was that Slime was in trouble, but that he was no longer in his arms. I don't know Sasuke," she mumbled as she tried to stand up but was once more restrained by the clone. She detested this, detesting the fact that Sasuke was using Naruto's face to sneer down at her, making her feel like a worthless worm. It hurt her more than anything a blade or club could. Sasuke was now unquestionably not the boy she knew and was infatuated on. He was a horrible person, one who doesn't really care about her. She thought through her pain. Addled mind, would he? If given the chance, just leave me behind? Leave me in some forgotten ditch as you carry on? Her tears threatened to well up again. She detested these times when she felt weak and ill. He's worse than trash, she mumbled as she finished, and Sasuke struck her again, hard enough to knock her unconscious. She was being carried by Naruto, but she had no idea how long she had been gone. All she knew was that her head hurt and she couldn't remember why. The jingle of the monk's staff as he carried her on his back helped her go closer to unconsciousness. She gasped, thinking it was her teammate's face, but it wasn't, and then she realized what Sasuke was doing. A tiny part of her was relieved that she wasn't left behind, but seeing Sasuke parade a clone around as Naruto was too much for her, and she started crying again. "You're weak," the monk said as he looked over his shoulder at her. "Shut up," she yelled, slapping the clone and falling to the ground with the shakuho and the shattered hat in tow. "Sasuke, where are we?" She snarled and idly noted that the shakuho now had one ring as she gripped it. She flinched as the shinobi gave her a menacing look, his dujutsu flaring in his eyes. "We're almost at the tower," she thought to herself. "We'll wait for the following team to go by so we can take their scroll." Sakura didn't know why, but she was afraid of the boy and kept her eyes fixed on him as she picked up the fallen hat and put it on her head. The two of them walked slowly out of the tree line and saw the tower, which loomed over them in the middle of the forest. Sakura wasn't able to identify the hunched figure sitting on a step in front of one of the sealed doors, but next to it was the red tiger that she had seen earlier in the exam. When Sakura realized who it was, she ran off in despair and slapped the figure, saying, "Naruto." They fell back onto the ground with her on top of Naruto. She knew that he had no idea of what was going on, but that didn't stop her from crying at the sight of the monk. Thoughts of what happened buried to the furthest reaches of her mind as happiness overtook her. She didn't care about how he was still alive, and how that tiger that was hovering over her was the very same tiger from the previous day. She was happy that he was still alive. Sakura had no idea as to how long they were on the ground, with her crying into Naruto's kasode, but it had to have been a while because her tears finally stopped. How? She could see his perplexity by glancing down into his blue eyes. "How are you still alive?" His eyes grew wide as he realized, "Oh, this Benitora just took me away so I could heal." Sakura couldn't tell, but she assumed that the tiger snickered. "Okay, he wouldn't hurt me. We've been best friends since we were little," the kunoichi thought, blinking owlishly at the boy beneath until he made a motion. "I thought that I was wandering around the forest once again and thought I ended up way over my head." He glanced at the massive tiger that was lying on its front paws, ignoring the streaked face of his teammate. Raising herself up, she blushed with shame and scratched the back of her head as he had so many times before. Glancing down and then back, she saw Slime holding the monk's belongings that she had been holding onto. Ignoring the glare and the suspicious looks from her teammates, she walked over to get them and headed towards Naruto, who had his hat and shakuho resting on her shoulder. "Here," she said softly, returning his items to him. Despite his seeming upset at having lost them, he seemed grateful to have them back. He muttered, "Oh man, my badass monk look is ruined," as he studied the hat. "Hey, I know you look like a cheap, poor monk who can't even take care of his hat," she said, laughing at his pout. When he finally arrived, Sasuke muttered, "They're cheap hats you can find anywhere, Dobi. They're a dime a dozen and sold everywhere." Not liking the look Sasuke was giving him, Naruto growled, "It's hard finding just the right one, bastard. So mind telling me what happened while I was away?" "You look like hell, Sakura," he said, his blue eyes locking with her green ones. What transpired with your hair?" Blushing under his attention once more, she recounted the events from the monk's defeat to their reunion, leaving out some details for her own benefit and Sasuke's since she didn't want to worry Naruto about their teammates' actions. "As for my hair," she said, looking down before turning to face the boy and rubbing her hair. "Well, I wanted a new look, and it looked like as good of time as any with that kunoichi holding on to me." She grinned at him as he gave her a proud look. "You look good with short hair." He moved to scratch Benitora behind her ears, forcing her to turn away as her blush refused to go away. "Anyway, see what I told ya? Recall what I said to you prior to the start of the exams? It's will, not strength or jutsu, that matters," she nodded. "With Lee not able to move, you held your ground against all three of them." Sasuke snorted, but they both ignored him. "That right there just shows that your will is strong. And that is all that matters because with a strong will and some work on the side of course, you can tackle anything." Sakura wanted to enjoy the moment despite her body's protests, but it was ruined when Sasuke decided to join in, saying, "If you're both done with your sappy moment, we still need to finish the test." Sakura was happy, pleased with the praise and the knowledge that her teammate wasn't dead. Sakura's annoyance flared. The Uchiha was starting to get on her nerves, especially with his desire to go on despite Naruto's temporary loss. The dark boy didn't seem to care about Naruto's loss other than the fact that he couldn't pass. Just as she was about to turn around and shoo him out, her legs gave out from under her. Naruto caught her, and she blushed as he wrapped his arms around her and held her close. "Thank you, Naruto," she muttered, feeling herself being supported by her teammate. "No, I should be saying thank you for looking after Slime and my belongings. Let's get inside now, you guys really cut it close, it's the last day and you both had me worried," he said, guiding her to the sealed door. "I apologize for worrying you like that. But like I said, Benny saw me hurt and took me to a place to rest." "What are you talking about? The scroll of earth is all we have." Sakura cast a sidelong glance and witnessed Sasuke pulling out the scroll they had acquired from the auto. "Nins." The monk waved at the tiger, and she couldn't help but wave back, happy that he had kept her teammate safe. Naruto gave the dark boy a flat look and asked, "You gave up our scroll?" Sasuke reacted as if he had been slapped. "Luckiest then that I had a backup and didn't mention it to you." He turned back to Benitora. "You be good now and don't cause too much for aka Obachan." Afterward, he turned back to Benitora. "Where is it located? What's where?" "The book." Ignoring the other boy, Naruto decided he could take it no more and led Sakura into the tower, ripping the talisman over the door in two as he pushed the doors open. As they continued through the hallways, the genin noticed a poster on the wall and Sakura read it. "I believe it instructs us to open both scrolls." "We have to open both the S-rolls," Sakura said, looking away ashamed of her actions. Naruto reached into his moist kasode, revealing his tears. The monk and the shinobi opened the scrolls, and smoke shot out of the seal inside, and Naruto nodded, ignoring the Sasuke's smoldering look. As he saw the scrolls explode into smoke, Naruto yelled, "Toss them! It's a summoning jutsu." Sasuke muttered, "You're," as he turned to face the figure that had emerged from the smoke. Kakashi stood in front of his team and said, "Yo," as he read from his book. "I see that you made it here, good work. It appears that you all had a difficult time there, but you all performed better on this test than I had anticipated." The kunoichi could tell that Kakashi was grinning as he tenderly stroked her hair. Now Sakura, let me finish," he said, putting his book away and standing up. "Congratulations, you guys just passed the second test." He would have continued if Sakura hadn't tackled him and yelled his name. "I'm sorry, Kakashi. Sensei, it's just that we're out of that forest," she said, trying to wipe away her tears, sniffling as she looked up at their sensei. "It was very harsh out there, sensei." The kunoichi nodded and moved away, saying, "Yes it is, but like I said before, they are a good learning experience." Kakashi knelt down to Sakura's level, his lone eye fixed on her green eyes. "It's a good experience for you because it is harsh, it pushes you." After blinking and feeling slime brush against the side of her head, she realized what Kakashi was talking about. Glancing over at Naruto, who smiled and nodded, she smiled back at her sensei and said, "This is Slime, he's one of Naruto's friends." The Jonin patted the creature and said, "Well, nice to meet you, Slime. Welcome to Team Kakashi. I now have to explain my motto before I let go any further." "Did you read it correctly? Okay, so this is the maxim that all of Konohagakure no Sato's Chunin and Jonin adhere to?" They nodded. Take note of the reference to the mind in the mention of heaven. It refers to your body when it uses the word earth. If you don't have heaven, you should educate yourself and sharpen your intellect. Sasuke, you are a great illustration of this. Although your physique is powerful, you still have a lot to learn. Sakura, you should work hard to become a better version of yourself because you lack nothing in heaven but rather on earth. If you possess both, you would be similar to Naruto, even though he does not possess ninjutsu. If you find yourself wanting in any one area, it's about improving yourself. No mission is ever too dangerous for you if you can find a balance between the two, Kakashi said, taking out his book once more before turning to head deeper into the tower. Now let's get you guys rested a bit. After hearing those words, the genin fell in step with Kakashi, but Sakura couldn't get rid of her unease around Sasuke. She wasn't sure why, but she knew that her crush on him was gone. Anko heard Jado, sitting on a couch in the tower's office without her coat on to cover herself, say, "This new suppression seal should prevent him from lashing out at you from now on," as he withdrew his hands from her neck. Aside from Karasu, he has always been there for her, not as much as the old monk due to his duties, but he always showed her his support. Does it still hurt, Anko? She heard the Hokage ask, and she couldn't help but appreciate the concern as she glanced at the older man. She returned her coat and lay back on the couch, saying, "Hokage Sama, I feel so much better. I sense that the pain is returning." She turned to face another area of the office and snorted, "It had better, because if that idiot grandson of mine couldn't do it, then I couldn't." She saw Karasu leaning against the window frame, standing next to it, carefully observing the meeting before releasing a sign that said, "I'm sorry, Anko Chan, I had." To the amusement of the men in the room, she stood up and said, "Save it, old man. What we should think about is what to do about the bastard's appearance and his tampering with the exams." Then, looking up at the Hokage, she said, "He's probably..." The Hokage cut her off before she could finish, saying, "I think we can assume that he was after Uchiha Sasuke. Naturally, we'll continue with the exams as scheduled while keeping a watch on Orochimaru's whereabouts. We will have to carry out our plan if he really did put the seal on the boy. We should take into account the demons he had with him," she blurted out as she nodded. "And his change," Jado added in his bit. "The seal is far more difficult to handle than we initially thought because of his change. Even though I detest to admit it, this seal is incredibly clever. In addition to improving the user, it also leaves a fragment of the seal caster on the target." Even though she had heard these words numerous times since she had woken up in the hospital with the man by her bedside, they still hurt her deeply because she knew that a portion of the bastard's soul was bound to her until they were able to break the seal or she passed away. What makes this worse is that he is no longer wholly human from the act of consuming the demon heart. He is now free to donate as much of his soul as he wants without facing any repercussions. What if something takes a piece of his soul or claims his soul altogether? The Hokage questioned, glancing at the two seal masters in the room. Karasu chose to respond and gave an explanation, saying that, "You cannot heal tainted souls if you take a part of them by force. It will only make a comeback if the owner gives it willingly." Observing the perplexed expressions, he turned to face his grandson. Everyone, with the exception of Karasu and Anko, stared at Jado in shock that he knew such information. He sighed and continued, "Here is an example. If you happen to use the same funinjutsu that was used to seal the Kyuubi no Yoko into Naruto, the Shiki Fujin." Hiruzen demanded to know, "How do you know this?" and Genma and Rado were prepared to respond. "It's not the first time I've seen Jinchuriki." The Hokage accepted the response with a nod. "Anyway, with the help of the Shinigami, you can potentially tear off a piece of the target's soul instead of sealing a soul into his bowels. After all, he's my cousin, and I was bound to find out sooner or later. No matter what is done, if you tear it off, it will never grow back because it is permanent. That way, you're essentially scarring the soul. But if you offer a little of yourself, you'll get better and be able to do it once more. Most of the people who split off pieces of their souls are just a pain in the ass to deal with. They just take one piece and put it into a vessel of their choice," Karasu concluded. "It's a step toward Orochimaru's desired, bastardized form of immortality. He can continue to exist like a parasite if he were to pass away because he has made every person a vessel for a portion of his soul." The Hokage mumbled, he must have finished that jutsu he was working on, and Enko's eyes widened, realizing what he meant. The seals are probably a means for him to abandon one body for another by conditioning them by corrupting their bodies. Jado, offering some small consolation to the kunoichi, declared with finality, if the victim has a strong will and doesn't give in to the temptations of the seal, their bodies will never be corrupted. If they choose to resist, they have no real issues aside from having it and having it act up occasionally until it can be removed. The only people who benefit from its use need to be worried. The second test had just concluded, and 7 teams had been confirmed, Moroku said as he appeared on the screen, before they could carry on with their conversation. Anko. Sama. The image on one of the room's televisions said. A preliminary round will be held for the third test in compliance with the Chunin selection exam regulations. As he turned to leave the room, Hiruzen said, Interesting for the first time in 5 years. Anko and the Seal Masters obeyed the old Hokage's order to follow and went to greet the examinees and guests. His 3 genin stood before his eyes, and while he was proud of them, he was intrigued by Sakura's tension, which he noticed during the brief moment of peace they shared before heading to the tower's arena. Sakura no longer says his name with the customary honorifics, and something happened in the forest about which he knew nothing. When he asked Sakura, she answered honestly, or as honestly as she could because she appeared confused as well. When he asked Naruto, he had no idea, as they were separated for several days in the forest, so he had no idea. As for Sasuke, he shot him one of his signature looks telling him it is none of his business. Kakashi nodded at the time, but from where he stood directly in front of Sasuke, he could see how tense she was. Every genin was at attention before the Hokage and the semicircle of jonins at his side, and he was standing with the jonin senseis behind the Hokage, who had Karasu and Jado behind him on either side. Glancing away from Naruto's family, he turned to face his students again. Naruto stood in the front, proud that he had made it this far and that Anko, his family, and himself were there to see him. Sakura stood behind the young multi-class ninja, looking even more displeased with herself. Kakashi hoped that she would perform well at this stage of the Chunin selection exams. She was really shaping up and had come a long way. Sasuke stood in the back, not liking his position. He wanted to stand in front, but Kakashi called for the team's lineup, and they agreed. Now he regretted it, as he realized that he should have placed Sakura in front and Naruto in between to ease her. Kakashi was not surprised that 5 of the 7 teams that ended up being from Konoha were also from that city, but he was taken aback by the presence of all 3 of the current rookie teams. They are all very talented, he thought to himself as he sent a glance over to his colleagues before glancing over at the 2 foreign jonin in the room. He had seen Baki a few times in passing when running diplomatic missions, and while the jonin from Odogakure no Sato was unfamiliar to him, something about those eyes reminded him of someone, though he couldn't quite place it at that moment. He was thinking, you guys have come a long way from the cadets, when he realized Guy was speaking to him. Huh? Have you made any comments? Anticipating a response, Guy turned away in exasperation, further perplexing him. From where he stood, he watched Anko turn towards the Hokage and lower her voice, "They're all yours, Hokage. Sama." Congratulations on passing the second test, Anko shouted to the genin from the Hokage's side. Now Hokage. Sama will explain about the third portion of the exam. Listen up and heed his words. Most of the genin looked indifferent to the words or were excited to be there in the presence of so many elite ninja, especially the Hokage. Though a few cast curious glances towards the old monk and the man at his side. The Hokage took a step forward and said, "I'd like to go over a few things regarding this exam before we start the third one. Why, in your opinion, are all of the Alliance's countries conducting such an exam? It's to raise the standards for ninja within all nations and promote friendship, but I don't want you to misunderstand the actual goal of the tests. Exams are an alternative to war," Jado growled, grabbing everyone's attention. Those in the Alliance were once despised adversaries. And they have created the Chunin selection exams to stop wasting ninja and resources in an unnecessary manner. Without a doubt, however, those who fail this exam and are not awarded the title of Chunin are not worthy of it. In addition, the examinations help elevate the status and honor of the countries of those who have progressed this far. It is during this last section of the test that leaders and delegates from other countries will be closely observing you. This is where they will determine whether or not you are worthy to be a Chunin. If you have shown yourself worthy, you will bring honor. If not, you will bring dishonor. The old man went on, where one land is strong, they will flourish and a weaker land will slowly fade away. As Kakashi watched the proceedings, he noticed Gekko Hayate, a fellow but sickly jonin, step forward and kneel before the Hokage. This is the place where you all will stake your lives on the line for not only your dreams, but for the dreams of your home. By doing so, you are showing the strength of a country which comes from its village. And the strength of its village is the strength of its ninja. These same ninja only show their true strength in the middle of a desperate life and death battle. Hayate, they're now yours. With a nod, the sickly Jonin rose to his feet and faced the genin. Hayate walked up to the genin and said, "There is something that we must do before we start this next part." During his speech, he coughed a few times and reached into his pouch to pull out a noteboard. "With so many of you left, and with so many honored guests coming, we can't take too much time showcasing each and every one of you. So we will be holding a preliminary round before the actual third portion of the exam. It is only because of the rules governing this exam that all nations follow that we are doing this, so don't be upset. So anyway, at this point, you will not be tested as a team but as individuals, so if you wish to quit now you can and not worry about disqualifying your teammates as well. Once I take down your names, you can leave." Kakashi was focusing on his team and didn't care about what the other people were doing. He did, however, idly enjoy watching Karasu smack Jado on the back of the head. His focus was on the dynamics within his team, not the conversation between Anko and Hokage regarding the silver-haired genin. He saw that Sasuke was holding his neck and occasionally smirking as he observed them. Something he would occasionally do after they got together at the tower. Even though Sakura and Sasuke were tense, Sakura appeared worried about something, but as soon as the boy grabbed her, she stopped. As he observed his students, the Jonin thought, "Now that is odd." Sasuke glared at the kunoichi and whispered something to her. When Sasuke saw that Sakura had given in, he removed his hand. Kakashi managed to make out Sasuke whispering, "I am an Avenger. I have to test my strength against the best of the best," which also catches Naruto's attention. Sakura suddenly froze, painfully aware that something horrible had transpired between the two genin. "I will not back down for anything, or don't you remember what I told you about talking back at me?" As he focused entirely on his teammates, he was able to hear Naruto ask, "What are you talking about, Sasuke?" When Sasuke spoke to Naruto, Kakashi couldn't help but detest the smirk on his face and the expression in his eyes. "Naruto, you're one of the ones that I want to fight." He was amused by Naruto's shocked expression despite the circumstances involving his team. He was aware that Sasuke had never really fought Naruto before and that Sasuke saw Naruto as a rival. Although Naruto was aware of this as well, he never gave it much thought and never saw Sasuke as a rival. The young monk was just doing during the bell test and never really focused on any sparring session. Since the boy was a fellow Konoha.nin and such things shouldn't happen, he might never have the strength to fight Sasuke seriously. If they engaged in a serious fight, one or both of them might not be able to walk away, Kakashi thought, barely controlling her smile. Seeing that no one else was going to leave, Hayate said, "If that is all, we'll now begin the preliminaries, which will consist of single matches as if this was a tournament." Kakashi counted off the heads and saw that there were still 20. "We will hold 10 matches to determine who advances to the next stage. The rules are is that there are no rules, so anything goes here. Each pair will fight to the death or until one loses consciousness or until admits defeat. Since we don't want any unnecessary deaths on our hands, if we determine an undisputed winner, I along with my colleagues will step in and end the match. Don't count on that though." He walked over to the wall that surrounded the statue. "From here on out, the matches will be determined by this electronic scoreboard where 2 random individuals will be determined. Now let's begin." Hayate stood over the downed masked genin and declared, "Uchiha Sasuke is the winner of the first match of the preliminary round." Breathing hard, Sasuke sat on the arena's concrete floor a few feet away. Naruto could not help but scowl at his teammate as he observed him from the balcony. He was enraged to see his hard work taken with only a glance when he saw his teammate use stances and moves that he himself had developed during the fight. Naturally, his teammate took the moves and made them his own. His grandfather touched his shoulder, sensing his growing annoyance, and said, "Do not get worked up over this, Naruto." The grandson could see a tiny smile lighting up his grandfather's face. Techniques, jutsus, and knowledge are bound to be passed on no matter what. After the match, Jado said, "Kakashi.Han, let's go," and the two men instantly stood over Sasuke. Seeing the flaring markings of the cursed seal of heaven, he understood why they were down there and that it was going to be suppressed. "Sakura, when did Sasuke get that seal?" he asked his pink-haired teammate after they had left. Feeling embarrassed about her silence earlier, she tensed up and looked down. After Orochimaru knocked you out. The elderly monk knelt down and put a consoling hand on her shoulder, saying, "Don't worry about it, child. It will be taken care of." After giving his grandfather a perplexed look, Naruto turned to look at Anko, who was standing beside them. She wanted to be with them to show her support, even though she could have stood with the Hokage. The Jonin shrugged her shoulders and returned her attention to the impending fight. He was confident that if she was content with the situation, particularly with the seal, then he should be too. "Okay. Let's get started with the second match," Hayate said while clearing his throat. Neji's teammate Tenten and his former classmate Aburame Shino were standing in front of him. With a nod, "Are you both ready? Begin?" As he watched the match below, Naruto couldn't help but notice the menacing glance that the red-headed Suna.nin, unquestionably the Jinchuriki he passed the other day, was shooting at him. He chose to ignore it for the time being and turned back to the two genin on the arena floor. Tenten stepped back a few times, biding his time until Shino moved. Instead, he merely stood there. A few seconds later, she launched several shuriken at the younger boy, who dove to avoid the flying blades. But he was unable to stop moving because the kunoichi were constantly attacking him with flying death. However, as soon as he stopped, a living wall of bugs materialized in front of him, deflecting the majority of the current attack while obscuring his opponent's view. In that fleeting instant, Tenten materialized behind him, his wooden staff raised. The shinobi was unaware of what had hit him. After seeing how Shino was doing, Hayate declared, "Kuno Tenten, the winner of the second match." When he was finished, he waved to the two medics waiting to take him away. "Well, it's almost over," a voice from behind said. He turned around and saw his sensei's masked face and his cousin's smiling face. Anko turned to face the men and said, "Weapons Girl managed to sneak a blow and did him in. So how did it go?" Saying, "It went fine. Sasuke is now being sent off to the hospital." Kakashi moved to sit next to his students. The Jonin from Odogakure no Sato isn't here." Jado moved to take a position next to Anko and remarked, "Like I said, Kakashi.Han, I was waiting on him to make his move." Anko, perplexed, chose to inquire, "What are you talking about?" The man let his hat dangle off the back of his neck and turned his head to face her. Naruto saw that she understood, giving his cousin a curt nod that said, "I'll explain later." Naruto turned to face the scoreboard and saw that the match's names had been displayed. Kiba and the kunoichi from Suna were there. He turned to face Kiba, who was standing quite low on the balcony, and as he prepared to jump to the ground, the boy gave him a menacing glare. Naruto was perplexed once more by this since he had no idea why the boy was acting in that manner. The older girl was easily defeated by the boy and dog tag team, thus ending the match quickly. As soon as someone yelled, "Gatsuga!" it was over. As the dog and boy triumphantly stood over the toppled kunoichi, Naruto saw that Kiba had given him a menacing glare. Naruto turned to face Jado as he felt a hand on his shoulder and said, "That boy has a bone to pick with you." Jado nodded. "Though that is the shittiest technique that I have ever seen. It's too straightforward and easy to counter." "How would you counter it?" "Smash a weapon into his face as he's flying at you." Naruto and everyone around him were dumbfounded and had to agree. Though it was one of the main strategies used by the Inuzuka clan, it was still a dumb move. Naruto couldn't help but wonder why that obvious flaw had gone unnoticed before. Once again standing on the balcony with a sly smile on his lips, Naruto kept his gaze fixed on Kiba, getting close enough to unnerve Hinata. The monk didn't like Hinata at all, and he knew the city well enough to recognize the warning signs. The next match is between Uzumaki Naruto and Rock Lee. Was announced by Hayate just as he was ready to move over and say something. He actually got excited when he heard his name called and left Sakuho with his teammate, not wanting to leave because he wanted to see how good he was against the older boy. Naturally, this is a test, so why not give it to himself? Although he wished his hat hadn't broken as he stood next to the sickly Jonin, there was nothing he could do about it at the moment and it was still a cozy object on his head. He was standing on the floor, staring at the eccentric boy and his equally eccentric sensei, and he couldn't help but smile. At the matchup, Kakashi couldn't resist palming himself. It was nearly unbearable for him to listen to Guy and his student talking. Swinging his arm across Lee's shoulders, Guy said, "Lee, I've noticed something that others may have overlooked," and the two of them fixed intense gazes on Naruto. "He is a monk and that tattered hat just doesn't do for a youthful look." If this was something that only now occurred to them, Kakashi couldn't help but feel bad for them. He heard Lee say, "Hi Guy Sensei," and salute. Yes, it was extremely embarrassing, and he had to question how his opponent had succeeded as much as he had. After giving one last swift salute, Lee leapt over the banister and landed on the floor close to Naruto. "All right, go show your flames of youth." When the show was over, Guy approached their group. "Kakashi, my eternal rival, it is a match between our proud students. Do you not feel the excitement coursing through your body?" If he was being completely honest, he shrugged and said, "Not really, but I do expect it to be a good match to watch." He then cast a sidelong glance at the two men who represented Naruto's family. "I'm sure that with the show of support here for Naruto, that he will fight even harder than he has before." Lee.San might be strong, Sakura said. He heard. He couldn't help but feel proud of his best student for her unwavering support of Naruto as she held onto his Shikuho for protection. He may have defeated Sasuke before, but Naruto is much stronger. Glancing over at Guy, Karasu said, "He'll be just fine." Jado blinked a few times and smiled, even though at times he is much like his foolish cousin who will draw out a fight if it's one he enjoys. "He is my grandson." "Of course, Karasu. Sama," Guy said, bending. "Naruto.San is your youthful grandson." Returning his focus to the arena, Kakashi could hardly hear Jado murmur, "Now I really feel like an old man." "All right, let's get started on the fourth match," Hayate said. The boys nodded. "Are you both ready? Begin?" With those words spoken, Naruto made a bow that startled everyone in the arena, even those closest to him. Lee, stunned, followed suit inanely. As he took a stand, Naruto wished Lee luck. "Glad to hear that." Lee responded with a more youthful, "May the best man win," striking one of Guy's signature "Nice guy" stances. That shudder ran down Kakashi's spine, and he couldn't stop it. Guy had made the boy into a clone of himself. "Just as you predicted when you fought Sasuke, there was a mismatch between the two of you. I'll say that this time around you are not mismatched against an opponent." "Why do you say that, Naruto.San?" Lee questioned, adopting a posture. After saying, "Because I usually mop the floor with the bastard," Naruto charged at the older boy, who deftly parried and blocked his blow. Lee launched a counterattack, but Naruto stopped the blow before it could land. The boys suddenly tried to kick each other, causing their legs to collide. Naruto winced in pain, but Lee showed no signs of discomfort. "Iron leg technique?" the elder genin asked, grinning, shaking his head before picking up where they left off. They stayed in the center of the floor, trading angry blows that just missed each other. Naruto was cautious to block kicks after the initial attacks, but other than that, they moved at such high speeds that the other genin thought they were not real. They did not use any weapons, just their bodies. Only twice had Kakashi witnessed the boy move this quickly. Once during the bell test and again during the mission to Wave. If he understood anything about Guy, it would be that his pupil is faster than he is currently indicating. Nonetheless, Naruto currently held a tiny speed advantage. It was evident when he eventually got past Lee's barriers and struck the older boy in the sternum with a palm strike. The blow knocked Lee back, but he bounced back fast. The elder genin made the decision to put some distance between himself and the monk after realizing that he was matched. In his excitement, he misjudged his opponent and leapt onto the statue beneath the scoreboard, revealing both boys' smiles to the one-eyed Jonin watching from the stands. "Kakashi, I want to know why Naruto is only using taijutsu. Why isn't he using any ninjutsu or genjutsu?" inquired Guy. He sighed and replied, "Even though he is perfectly capable of using them, he just doesn't care for them much. I'm still trying to work around that." Guy turned to face Lee and gave him the thumbs up, saying, "I see, then he won't win at this rate. Lee, take them off." "But Guy Sensei, you told me to only do that for when I must protect many precious people," the young clone yelled back, his voice laced with confusion. Naruto was drawn to it as well, and he appeared interested in the interactions between the teacher and the pupil. "It's all right, I'll allow it." As the young clone sat down on the statue and started removing his orange leg warmers, Kakashi could see excitement on his face. After they were removed, Kakashi noticed the weights fastened to the child's thighs. As Lee replaced the leg warmers, he thought, a bit of an old-fashioned training method. He heard Naruto mutter something about how that was the previous trick and shake his head. After completing his wardrobe adjustments, Lee got to his feet and extended both weights. "Oh, that feels so much better now," the genin exclaimed, appearing to get excited. "Now that the weights are released, I can move freely." The force of the impact caused them to crash into the ground and release smoke. With the exception of Karasu and Jado, everyone was in disbelief at the sheer weight required to form two sizable impact craters. "I heard Jado say, 'Gramps, he really does take after me,' to Kakashi. Having fun with a fight and letting it drag out like this. I'm so proud of him." As he watched the match, Karasu muttered, "Yeah, but luckily for us that he wasn't an asshole like you were," missing Jado's arrogant expression at the time. "Lee, go!" Guy yelled just before his pupil disappeared and then reappeared behind Naruto. The younger boy swung a punch, barely blocking the attack. Beneath him, Lee disappeared and he met only air. Lee attempted to catch Naruto the same way he had caught Sasuke the week before, but Naruto flipped backwards. As he rolled back to his feet, he attempted to reevaluate his opponent but was unable to do so because he had to block and avoid the incredibly quick strikes. A few of the attacks managed to breach his defenses and result in hits. Even though his attacks weren't any stronger or faster than before, his increased mobility gave him the crucial advantage over Naruto's previous superior speed. With a front flip, Lee smashed his foot over Naruto's head while Kakashi blinked. Lee smirked at his accomplishment as he skipped back, assessing the damage, but it collapsed when he saw Naruto still standing, his hat broken and scattered across the floor. Karasu called out, "Boy," drawing the attention of all. "Take off you clothes." Everyone was in shock, but Naruto was the most shocked, giving him a disbelieving glance before yelling, "What the hell, Gramps?" Jado grinned and said, "Do as you're told," Runt, and Anko also grinned. "Take off your clothes, boy, take off your clothes." Anko yelled, "Strip boy," and gave a catcall. With a sigh, he turned back to Lee and tried his best to ignore his family. He undid his sash to reveal only his boxers, even though they were the ones who knew best and the clothes were obstructing his vision. He shivered, knowing he would get cold without his clothes on because the room was drafty. He threw his clothes to the side, creating their own impact crater, because he was upset with his family. Naruto cried out, "What the hell?" as he noticed the holes his clothes had left in the floor. He glanced at his family again, who were doing their best to appear innocent, incredulous. A fire flared in Lee's eyes. "Naruto-san, that is a most youthful training method," he said. The monk simply nodded, acknowledging that, although he was uncomfortable being the center of attention while wearing only his boxers, he did feel lighter overall. He glanced at Hinata, Kurenai's student, which Kakashi noticed. Glancing over at her, he saw that she was pale and appeared as though she might pass out at any second. The boy was perplexed and concerned for the girl, probably believing that she was ill or something, and the masked Jonin grinned at the sight. "Now let us begin." The elder genin lunged towards Naruto, who instantly disappeared from view. He reappeared behind Lee, hitting the older boy's head with a kick. Lee veered to one side of the arena and collided, head first, with the wall. Sakura was excited for her teammate, and Kakashi couldn't help but wince at what he saw. It used to be aimed at Sasuke, but for some reason it isn't anymore. Need to investigate this further, he thought to himself while observing Naruto maneuver around Guy's pupil like a tortoise. He smirked at the look of shock that was fixed on Guy's face as he glanced over at him. It was wonderful to know that his pupil was now winning the battle. However, this was only a minor consolation because the boy's grandfather had shaped him in this way more than he had. Studying his fallen opponent, Naruto adopted a new stance that Kakashi had never seen him adopt before, but he knew right away that it was ideal for his pupil. He appeared to be bursting with power in this new stance, as if it were intended just for him. "Naruto-san, it has been a wonderful fight, but I shall not lose to you and I will end it with this next move," exclaimed Lee, peeling himself off the wall and closing his eyes. The elder genin then crossed his arms in front of him. Lee's skin reddened and soon the air was heavy with power. "Guy, you didn't," Kakashi said, turning to confront the strange Jonin. The man nodded and said, "You showed him how to open the gates. How many can he open?" Jado casually replied, "Looks like 5, speaking for the other man. This is interesting, but it won't be enough to stop a kid who is so much like me." Outraged by the elder man's casual disregard for his student's abilities, Guy turned on him and glared at him, asking, "What makes you think that he will win?" The individual shrugged. "He has the right stuff. He won't fall here just because your student opened the gates doesn't mean that it'll help him. Right now he is barely keeping up with the kid." He was correct. The two boys were doing acrobatics in the arena, moving at such a speed that their collisions sounded like thunder. "It seems like a brawl between a group of friends," Anko murmured in a low voice, taking in the intensity of the two boys' fight. Kakashi nodded, but he knew in his heart that Sasuke would be incensed about the distance between him and his teammate if the boy got a chance to see this. But this fight was like watching him and Guy spar. It brought back memories of their few shared matches. When thunder roared, everyone's gaze was focused on the center of the floor. Naruto's foot was attached to Lee's head and he was in the air. The older boy smashed into a wall, landing on his back, and it seemed like time stopped for a second before accelerating once more. His lips curled into a smile as he lost consciousness, his skin going pale. Until Hayate declared him the winner. Naruto refused to back down. After being crowned the winner, he leapt to a height that allowed him to smash his skull against the ceiling. He collapsed again, cradling his head and swearing under his breath before passing out. With a chuckle, Kakashi leapt to the ground and picked up his pupil. Anko said, "Looks like the kid had fun," as she sat Kakashi against the wall. Jado was left to bring back Naruto's clothes because he was afraid to try to lift them. "When I think back on his clothes, they were most likely the cause of his excessive weight, which prevented anyone from ever being able to throw him." Satisfied with his victory, Kakashi watched his student and nodded. He could just picture himself later shoving this in Guy's face. He'll readily acknowledge that Karasu provided the majority of Naruto's training, but there's simply too much of an opportunity to let the green-clad Jonin get away with it without doing so. Hell, he could argue that, at this point, more of his students than he are making it to the finals. Indeed, that would be detrimental to their rivalry. Just as he was about to say something hip and cool for Guy to get all worked up over, Hayate called for the girl on Asuma's team and his last student. When Sakura saw the screen, she was unsure of how she should react. She couldn't help but wish that they were friends again, even though she was glad to have the opportunity to take on her rival. She would be able to sort out her mixed feelings for the Uchiha over the past few days with its assistance. She sensed a shift in her subconscious and realized that her fear of the boy had its roots in his decision to continue living as Naruto's clone. Because the boy was present, she was unable to tell anyone earlier, but even though she could now, she couldn't bring herself to do so. After giving Karasu Naruto's shakuho, she calmly went to the floor and stood in front of her purple-clad, blonde rival. "So Sakura, it's just you and me now. I never thought that I'd be fighting you," Ino said, his eyes burning with resolve. "Know this, Ino, I'm not going to fight with you over Sasuke, and the last thing that I'd do would be letting you near him," Sakura said, reaching up to her Hite.8 and pulling it loose as she heard those words. Sakura saw Ino flinch and was secretly pleased with the response. To keep her from witnessing the darker side of the boy, the pink-haired Kunoichi promised her that she would never again allow her to be close to the Uchiha. He was resolved to go on despite his casual dismissal of Naruto's death. It was only by happenstance that they ran into the monk again that allowed them to complete the final test. Sakura can see her rival growing enraged and says, "You're not his type." She tied her Hite.8 around her forehead and heard Kiba shout indignation. "Besides, I'm a ninja of Konoha, participating in the Chunin selection exams. We're all here to prove ourselves as ninjas, not as a pair of dogs fighting over a piece of meat." With her rage growing, Ino said, "So that's how it's going to be then," as she too wrapped her Hite.8 around her forehead. The examiner, clearly irritated with the pre-battle talk, looked at both Kunoichi and said, "Are you both ready now?" As soon as he saw them nod, he let the match start. After saying those words, Sakura sealed the deal with her hands and Ino launched both of her Kunoichi at the other, fists raised. She summoned two bunchins and they moved in the direction of her opponent. Just as Ino exclaimed, "This isn't the academy. You can't beat me with such basic moves," the real Sakura materialized in front of her in an instant. The blonde Kunoichi flew back a few feet, not knowing what had hit her. Kakashi was unable to hide his satisfaction with his pupil. She used a very cunning ruse to make the Yamanaka take her seriously, but the conviction in her statements about keeping the girl away from Sasuke alarmed him. The last straw to see what was going on, if there had been any indications before. He smiled to see her employing the basic illusionary clones and demonstrating her adeptness in manipulating chakras. Jado said, "Oh, she is a talented firecracker," which he overheard. He turned to face the man and observed him studying his pupil while holding one hand over his chin. "I wonder how she will fare against her opponent, especially with her injuries." As he turned back to Sakura, He saw the fortunate blow that had gotten past her defenses, and Kakashi winced. The girl staggered, but did not fall. The Jonin declared, "She will win. She has a heart that cannot bear to be defeated." He had complete faith in his pupil. In the few months they had known one another, he had watched her grow, trained her, and given her instructions. Sakura was Guy's student, just as Lee was his star pupil, and he supported her wholeheartedly. It filled his heart with pride to see her fight so fiercely. Her perseverance will sustain her, Jado concurred. However, how long will she last? Your team was the last to arrive and she seemed worse for wear. I have no doubt that a single good blow to her head will end this for good, and if not, she will likely fall after the match ends. The Jonin became enraged at his student's evaluation, but he was powerless to ignore it because he could also see the warning signals. No matter how well he worked her, the girl was exhausted after the last test. Despite her best efforts to appear strong, Kakashi grew concerned as the fight went on because he could tell that she was practically out of gas. His concerns increased when the other girl became enraged at his student's continued taunting and yanked off her long ponytail, which she then threw around them to make her point. "What is she doing?" inquired Jado, observing that Ino was getting ready for a jutsu and aiming at Sakura, who was motionless. He turned to face the man, who appeared to be quite amused by the match thus far, and replied, "It's the Shintention. What it does is that it allows the user to take over another person's body by sending out a bolt of mental energy." And replacing the intended target's mentality, the man cut in, realizing what Kakashi was getting at. The Jonin gave a nod. The man nodded, realizing that was a disadvantage of the jutsu. However, if she misses, she will be vulnerable for a few minutes as her projection slowly returns back to her. The girl fired her jutsu at Sakura, who moved to dodge, crying, "Ninpo. Shintention no jutsu," until her body went limp. Sakura said, "Looks like you lose Ino," as she started to move toward her opponent but quickly withdrew when she felt a constriction in her legs. "What the? Got ya, Sakura?" Her opponent looked up and exclaimed. She had her hands on the floor and encircled Sakura's legs with a strand of hair. "You fell for my trap, and now I got you." Jado remarked, "She must be running on fumes now to not be doing trying to move now," as Ino got to her feet and continued to channel chakra through her hair on the ground. Kakashi nodded, fear trying to take root inside of him but squelching it before it could. She could run forward and attack her. Win or lose, this is a test, not a real life or death situation, and he is proud of his student for persevering through the entire fight. Once again, Ino went limp, and Kakashi saw the bewildered expression on his pupil as she blinked several times. As she examined herself and regained her ability to move, she tried to comprehend what had just happened. Aware of her good fortune, she scratched idly at her stomach, as if something bothered her. She took out a kunai and held it up to Ino's throat. It was only a moment after this move that Hayate pronounced her the winner before Ino came to. She yelled indignation, "What the hell?" as Sakura began to lose consciousness as a result of being pushed past her breaking point. "What the hell happened?" Kakashi asked, grinning, ignoring the girl as he picked up his pupil. He was aware of how she ultimately prevailed and that everything and anything can be used as a ninja tool in the world of ninjas. All three of Kakashi's students made it to the next round of the Chunin selection exams, which made him very happy. He placed the kunoichi against the wall next to Naruto and thought, the only problem now would be training them all. I'm going to have to isolate Sasuke from the others because of Orochimaru's interest in him. While I'm sure Sama will look after Naruto, who can I trust to make sure Sakura has the best possible time over the next month? Kakashi.Han did well, she did well, Jado said, standing behind the Jonin, who gave him a nod in return. Naruto let out a moan, his headache pounding. He was blinded by the light and felt a little cold. He heard a voice say, "Glad to see that you've returned to the land of the living." He gave his eyes a few blinks to adjust to the new light, and then he saw his grandfather's beaming face. He asked, "How'd I do?" as he stood up and saw that they had covered him with his kasode. There was a thud as it hit the ground. "You kicked his ass, kid," Anko said, turning her back on Choji and the mask. Wearing Auto.Nin he was observing. And to add insult to injury, you were half naked to boot. Remembering that, he blushed, then turned to face his grandfather angrily. "Why the hell are my clothes weighted?" The elderly monk dismissed his ire with a smile, saying, "It was all a part of your training." He then gave Naruto a mischievous little twinkle in his eyes. As the old monk pointed behind the boy, he saw Sakura battered and beaten, resting against the wall with slime in her lap. Besides, it was fun seeing both yours and everyone else's reaction to the weighted clothes. Poor Hinata. Shan looked ready to faint, and Sakura. Shan there was so embarrassed that she was sputtering left and right. His sleeping teammate caught his attention, and he couldn't help but wonder, did she win? Karasu nodded and pointed to the area where Team Asuma was positioned, saying, she did. She did a number on her, but if Sakura Shan wasn't so banged up to begin with, she would be standing right now. Although she was fortunate to have slime on her at the moment, Kakashi remarked, turning his back on the battle. Ino tried to possess her after snaring her leg with an improvised rope made from her own hair. She failed once she took over slime. Lucky for Sakura, she lasted long enough to be declared the winner before exhaustion caught up with her. Naruto couldn't help but chuckle as he watched Choji roll around the floor like a huge boulder trying to squash the auto-nin. Run kid run, his cousin yelled as he looked down at the fight. This is such a one-sided fight. Saying, well, Sakura did ruin his gauntlet back in the forest, Kakashi said. Naruto nodded, recalling that Sakura had informed them during the few hours leading up to the ceremony that she had Naruto's Shikuho at the time and smashed it back when they attacked her. However, Sasuke appeared to laugh at that, clearly unimpressed with her achievement. Yay, and that makes this match more of a game of cat and mouse than anything else. Look, that Choji kid almost had him just now. If he isn't careful, the kid will be a pancake. As he put his clothes back on, Naruto nodded. He thought grimly, that will be the last time I strip during a fight. He was worried by Hinata's expression, it was too embarrassing to do that. She must be experiencing dizziness once more. Yes, that must be the case. She has a history of doing that. Unfortunately, despite Karasu's praise for him and his comparison to Jado, Naruto's grandfather is the first to acknowledge that, despite Naruto's lack of his cousin's bad behavior, the boy was still stupid. Of course, Naruto is unaware of this and believes that his best friend is suffering from some sort of illness. The winner of the 8th match of the preliminary round is Akamichi Choji, Hayate exclaimed as soon as he was done, and Naruto winced as he saw the auto-nin. Although he was still alive, he had to be in excruciating pain because Choji had rolled over him like a rolling pin. Fear pulled at Naruto's heart, causing him to freeze. The next match is Hyuga Hinata against Hyuga Neji. He noticed the smug grin on Neji's face as he turned to look at him from the side. This is not good, he muttered, glancing worriedly at his best friend. When she saw it, she gave it back as well. He was aware of her anxiety as well as the fact that the older boy had been looking forward to this day for a long time. He could finally vent his resentment towards Hinata for being the main reason behind his father's demise here. Though it was wrong and terribly misplaced, the boy was obsessed with that one moment and fate regardless of what anyone said. She looked appreciative of Naruto's encouraging gaze as she moved to the center of the floor, where Neji was already waiting. Jado said, family fighting family, from the sidelines. I hate seeing these kinds of fights, even if they are part of arranged matches. The boy looks ready to kill the girl. Karasu said, he has a lot of hatred in him, appearing to be concerned for Hinata as well. Their home is divided and the side he is part of is the servants while Hinata is the heiress. His role in the family is to serve and protect her, but he doesn't like it, hasn't since the day his father died. In actuality, it's just clan politics, Jado's Anko continued. The division was done in order to preserve the family line and the purity of their blood. The Jonin and his cousin were staring up at Naruto when he saw the man shake his head and say, they're a family that practices inbreeding. That will only hurt them in the long run. Jado shook his head, seeing no use in arguing this. Yes, but if their blood thins out then the Byakugan would be lost. With a tighter grip on the banister, the boy said, Hinata. Shan will be all right, she's strong. Upon feeling a hand rest on his shoulder, he noticed his grandfather observing him from below. The elderly monk expressed his worries for the girl by saying, there is no doubt that she is strong, it's just her will to fight the boy, she is too kind. Neji said, I never dreamed that we'd find ourselves fighting each other Hinata. Sama, as he lay down on the ground and hardly concealed his excitement. Neji. Nissan, Hinata mutely uttered while gazing at her cousin with concern in her pallid eyes. Before we begin, there's something that I'd like to say something Hinata. Sama. You're not fit to be a ninja. Quit now, no one will think less of you. You hate fighting, you're too kind, and you follow others easily. You joined only to allow your teammates to have the chance to be promoted. No, Hinata muttered, turning her head away from Neji. You're incorrect. I had intended to attend, she said, glancing at Naruto. I wanted to be here, to prove that I'm a strong kunoichi. Naruto knew that Hinata had lost to the younger, more skilled girl, but Hinata didn't give it her all because she didn't want to hurt her 7-year-old sister. You're wrong. You are nothing more than the spoiled brat of the main house. You're weak. You lost to Hanabi Sama when you both fought. Right now you're lying about being here. My eyes can tell me that you're not here to prove yourself. You're here to prove your strength, and see if you can match others as hopeless. People cannot change themselves. They're bound to their fates. Jado held his head and muttered, "Oh boss, will this kid shut up now before I kill him?" Seeing Hinata start to back down from the boy was frustrating. With fury pulsing through his body, Naruto yelled, "Shut the hell up," witnessing the psychological attack on his closest friend. His eyes lit up with determination as Hinata-chan spoke. "Hinata Chan, don't let the bastard get to you. Kick his ass and show him what you're made of." Hinata nodded in return, saying, "Make him eat his words, Hinata Chan." Neji. Nissan, let's fight, Hinata exclaimed, slipping into her fighting stance. He concurred and assumed her stance. Karasu held up a sign that said, "This will be a rough fight. For both to use the Hyuga Juken style of taijutsu, this will be rough." Hyuga Juken? Jado inquired, intrigued by the fashion. It is a gentle style, is it not? Naruto nodded and chose to respond to his cousin. Yes, it is. But unlike our style or Lee's style, their style revolves around crippling the inner workings of the body by channeling chakra through their blows. A mere tap or glance could prove fatal, especially with their dujutsu, the Byakugan, which allows them to easily target those places. The man laughed at that last evaluation and added a few remarks of his own. Anyone can use it, they don't need the dujutsu to do so. They just need to know where to hit for it to work. Those the field of vision that the dujutsu offers is the real strength. Naruto looked away from the Hyuga cousin's deadly yet exquisite dance, startled by the reply. Naruto nodded rapidly and returned his focus to the floor. All a person has to do is learn how, and they can do so. Being able to see just gives a slight edge, but it isn't necessary. The scene in front of him made his heart tighten. Neji parried Hinata's blow and struck her in the chest with his palm. The kunoichi's lips burst into blood, and then she struck out again, only for him to block it and then strike back at the offending arm. When Neji realized Hinata wouldn't be retaliating anytime soon, she pushed back Hinata's sleeve, exposing the red welts along her arm. Panic hit home at Hinata's expression. Fearing for his best friend, the young monk muttered, "No way, he can see the tenketsu." He winced at the pain the kunoichi must be feeling, especially after taking another palm strike that knocked her back a few feet. He has control of the fight, he said. At this point, the young monk's ears were deaf to everything that was said. He watched as Hinata battled to stand up and battled with himself to keep her safe from what he was witnessing. She was no longer able to focus her chakra, and Neji was skillfully sidestepping her blows like a dancer. Neji stood close to Hinata and buried his palm in her chest before long. The younger monk felt a great deal of dread as the older boy retreated, letting Hinata land face first on the earth. Hinata struggled to stand, defying the examiners and Neji's expectations that she was done for good. Time seemed to slow down for the young monk. She is a fighter. Karasu put his hand on Naruto's shoulder and spoke solemnly. Her will is strong, though she can barely stand. Those blows did a number on her. Hinata Sama, you have to accept destiny now, Neji said, turning to look at her. From birth, you've been burdened with the responsibility of the clan. You are too weak. Quietly accept your fate and you need not suffer anymore. With a bloody cough, Hinata replied, You're wrong, Neji. Nissan. I can see that it is not I who is suffering. It is you who has been suffering. Being caught between the tensions of both branches of the clan, it's the source of your suffering. Unaware of what was about to happen, Naruto watched as Hinata spoke to Neji in a composed manner before the elder Hyuga lost it. Before he knew what had happened, Neji was being restrained by his sensei as well as Hinata's and Lee's. Guy yelled, Enough, Neji, while securing Neji's body. You swore to me that you wouldn't drag the issues with your clan into this. This is not the place to be doing so. The shinobi growled, sensing that Kakashi and Kurenai were holding both of his arms. Then why did the other Jonin get involved as well? he said. Especially with the examiner in front of him, there was nothing he could do. The girl behind them went to her knees and started coughing up more blood, so the Jonin turned their attention from the boy to her. More special treatment for the main house? He asked, ignoring him. When Naruto noticed his best friend was on the ground, he leapt over the balcony and raced in her direction. There was nothing he could do to help his best friend who was hurt, and he had no idea what to do. She closed her eyes slowly and all he did was kneel over her. Neji said, "Naruto, here are some words of advice." After he was freed, Naruto felt a surge of anger at the words. A true warrior doesn't cheer for others. Also, in the end, a loser is always a loser no matter what they seem to accomplish. Naruto stood up and faced him, and it seemed like something inside of him snapped. As his rage started to build, Naruto said in a low, dangerous tone, "You want to see what I can do?" His cousin vanished from sight in front of him before he could reach the boy, even though he had seen Neji laugh at his remarks and was enraged by them. "Take it easy there, kid," his cousin said, restraining the genin. As worthy as the brat is of a thrashing. Naruto grinned, watching Neji become agitated at the remark. He nodded, understanding the reasoning behind it, but it didn't ease his feelings. Giving him one now when he's not your set opponent is not wise. You are in the middle of a test, and they have rules. Do you understand me? Even though he didn't like it, he almost missed the medics carrying Hinata out of the room when he said, "Neji, we both know that Hinata-chan could have killed you with only a single seal, but she was too kind to do that to you, her own cousin that wanted to kill her." He knelt down, smeared some of her blood on his palm, and threw his fist at the older boy, returning to where she had been. With barely controlled anger, the boy said, "I swear on her blood that I will give you the beating of a lifetime," as Hinata's blood dripped from his hand. When he was finished, he returned to his grandfather's position and stood there alone, waiting for the next match to start. Hiruzen was filled with pride for the young genin in front of him. They were all 9 moving on to the next round. The Uchiha was not present at that moment, of course, but he did remark absently that 2 of the people advancing were from Sunagakure and 8 were from Konohagakure. Though it was part of the life of a ninja, he was saddened to see the Sunagakure Jinchuriki kill the final boy from Atagakure. Death is all around them, and if you're not ready, it could happen at any time. He smiled and said, "Now I shall begin explaining the finals. As I said before, you will be performing in front of an audience where you will be representing your lands before them. It is these people who you will be exhibiting your skills for in a month. We're not doing it now because we need to prepare for the gathering. It is a big event of course, and we'll need to send out the results of the first 2 parts of the exam to the participating countries. Though this also gives you all the opportunity of improve yourselves and understand what your enemies are capable of. Even though you were all going in blind in the battles that have already occurred, you will actually know who your opponent is when we reconvene." He turned to Anko, who was holding the box. "I'd send you off now, but there is just one last thing that we need to take care of. Anko, will you be a deer?" "Hi Hokage." "Sama," she grinned tensely. The elderly man had to suppress his laughter so as not to aggravate her anymore, but that didn't stop Karasu's oldest grandson from making jokes. When he saw the look of irritation on her face and the smile on his own, he became very happy. "Okay you runts, I have a box with slips of paper in it. You are only to take one. I'll be coming to each of you, so don't worry about anything at all." Hiruzen asked, starting with the left, "What number do you have written on your slip?" after assigning a number to each genin. 9, said Sunagakure's puppet user Konkaru, holding up his slip. 8, exclaimed Shikamaru, Team Asuma's slothful shinobi. 6, said Sakura. 1, was Naruto's reply. 3, Sunagakure's Jinchuriki Gaara said simply. Neji answered. 2, 5, stated Tenten. 10, Choji said, looking a little taken aback by what was happening. 7, Kiba snarled, glancing at Neji and Naruto. There you have it, number 4 would be Uchiha Sasuke, Ibiki wrote in a pad. Now that the matches you just fought in were set up as if you were in a tournament, the finals are actually a 1, Hiruzen said, nodding to the genin. He was amused by their startled reactions, though, and decided to enjoy watching them. Ibiki, will you show them the pairings? The old Hokage worried a little when he saw the happy faces on both Naruto and Neji, but he had to let it slide. Even though I said that this is a tournament and there is only one winner, don't think that only one of you will become a chunin, which would be rather silly. The man nodded and showed them the matches. Consider moving on in the finals as a way to increase your opportunities to demonstrate your abilities and establish your eligibility to wear the rank of Chunin. Keeping this in mind, you all have to prove yourself. You might or might not get promoted. You are all now dismissed until our next meeting, which is in 1 month. After hearing the dismissal, most people left the tower, but none more quickly than Naruto, who was determined to see his best friend in the hospital and would stop at nothing. Anko, Kakashi, and Naruto's family were the only people who stayed behind with the Hokage. Hokage. Sama, what are we to do about the Uchiha? The worried Kunoichi asked. The Hokage turned thoughtfully to face the shinobi and asked, "What do you think, Kakashi?" The man sighed and stiffened at attention, taking a moment to weigh his options. Orochimaru made an appearance just after Jado Dotsan sealed the mark. Anko looked furiously at Naruto's cousin. He made it known that he is looking for Sasuke for his Dujutsu. Hiruzen nodded, seeing that his thoughts were confirmed, much to his dismay. Keeping Sasuke in the public eye would be a poor idea with Orochimaru and his agents floating about. The Hokage nodded again and turned to face his friend, asking, "What are your recommendations for stopping demons since he has access to them?" The two demons are part of a group known as the Kimin Devils, the elderly monk said, pausing briefly to scratch the back of his head before responding. They have occasionally caused problems, but nothing particularly concerning. He may have recruited them, but if so, we are looking at 6 more groups, as they are relatively small in terms of both size and power. Since they don't resemble Bijus at all, your Anbu should be able to deal with them should they arise. Finding them, though, is the tricky part. With Orochimaru's help, they might be hiding anywhere. Remember that he is in charge of Otogakure no Sato. With a village directly under his jurisdiction, you shouldn't question what he can or cannot do. Jado continued. He has overcome more than demons. Hiruzen tried to steer the conversation in order to help develop understanding of what his former pupil had been up to. But the question is, how did he manage to get the demons to work for him, he questioned. Before exchanging glances, Karasu and Jado both sighed. There are just as many ways to hire a ninja as there are to enlist the help of a demon. Because of the nature of demons, it just seems unreal, the elderly monk clarified. Is there a way to separate him from his evil allies? Sadly, there isn't a set way. After all, they're children of chaos, Jado sighed, scratching the back of his head. It is possible to take action, but it is also possible to resist action. Your best option is to confront them directly. This time, Kakashi asked, "Can we ask help from the order?" wanting some answers to his own questions. He nodded. The head of the order, Sojobo, won't allow the order to get involved with open conflict. If he did, then that is asking for trouble all over the continent. Knowing that would have been problematic, Hiruzen nodded. What about your presence here? Hiruzen. Dono, Konohagakure no Sato is my grandson's in my home. Basically, I would be doing things by myself. Although the monks from the Fire Temple are technically former ninja with a foundational knowledge of the more esoteric arts, we may be able to enlist them. Since they are former ninja and live within the Fire Country, we can get them to aid us in our time of need, the Hokage said, nodding to himself. What threatens Konohagakure threatens them as well, Kakashi stated. The power of the country is the power of its village, and without its village, the country will likely fall. As the conversation was coming to an end, Hiruzen said, "Yes, but what are we to do about your team, Kakashi? As you said before, we need to isolate Sasuke and keep him out of sight. I am aware that you would like to train all 3 of your students now that they have advanced to the finals. As much as I don't like it, I am the most qualified to both train and protect him," the shinobi sighed. "But I won't be able to prepare them all that much unless I give them specific individual training, especially with what I've seen from both Sakura and Sasuke today. But I'm not sure what to do about Sakura and Naruto together. As we have seen, Karasu Sama, Naruto, is a very strong boy who could really use some experience in ninjutsu." Hiruzen nodded, obviously aware that Sakura's training was the most important of the 3. "I really don't know what to do with Sakura. Her training is the most crucial of all 3. Much to Kakashi's surprise, Karasu responded, "You don't have to worry about Naruto's training. His godfather will take care of that." "Jiraiya will take care of the boy Kakashi," Hiruzen replied. He and Karasu Dono made a deal whereby when the boy eventually turned ninja, he would train him as an apprentice in the ninja arts. It was arranged for him to receive training apart from your team. Jiraiya is very busy, so it would have been bad for the boy to take him on as a full-time apprentice. My student is probably at the hot springs right now. Once we return to the village, I'll send for him, but for now, the girl is the main concern. Jado broke the contemplative silence for a few moments by saying, how about I train the girl for the month? It will provide me with an alternate task while I'm here, aside from completing the cursed seal of heaven for Anko-chan. Though grateful that the man volunteered, Kakashi expressed that he knew very little about him. Not that I'm dismissing you or anything, Jado-san, but I just can't let you handle her training, Kakashi told him. Do you have any teaching experience? Hiruzen inquired, curious about the man in front of him. Jado replied, I have, and my first student was a young girl who was a bit younger than Sakura when I dragged her off the streets. Karasu sighed nostalgically, ah Neko-chan, such a nice young girl. She turned out just fine with you after having you as her master for so many years. You can count on Hiruzen Dono to treat Sakura fairly for the upcoming month. Then what about your arrangement with Anko? The elderly Hokage inquired, perceiving that the man was also involved in other matters. It's not that big of a deal really, the kunoichi flinched, looking at Anko who appeared uninterested in the proceedings. It would keep me busier but not enough to prevent me from our arrangement. Additionally, we're neighbors, anyway. You have my word that I will make the girl worthy of being promoted, he concluded, grinning, slapping an arm across the kunoichi's shoulders. Something he shouldn't have done. Much to Hiruzen's amusement when a kunai flashed into Anko's waiting hands and aimed for one of the man's kidneys. The elderly Hokage could barely contain his laughter at the looks on the faces of the man and woman, asking, what about Anko? I already gave her my word, so there are no worries there. Kakashi, I know that this isn't what you may have liked, but like we already discussed, it'll fit within the situation we're facing. Hiruzen nodded, turning back to Kakashi, who appeared irritated by the circumstances. The Jonin nodded, knowing that he was correct and that, as the Hokage, his word was law. Now then, Karasu Dono, before we head back to town, I have to know. Given that Naruto is your grandson and that he wants to join the order, should we anticipate receiving any correspondence from the order? He's not pledged, but as my grandson, it would be expected of him to become one, so a representative other than me may come, the elderly monk said after pausing for a short while before responding. However, we'll have to wait and see on this one. With a nod, Hiruzen said, I see. Then he turned to leave. Come, let us leave. There is much to be done in the coming weeks, and those kids will need some help, of course. The sterile room, the beeping of the machines, and the prone form of his best friend lying on the bed before him with devices hooked up to her. It made him feel small, insignificant. He wondered about his strength, but he knew that was a pointless question to ask. He knew that the circumstances were just right for Neji to do this to Hinata, and he knew that there would be hell to pay for what he did to her. Every time his mind wandered to the boy, he would quiver with barely restrained anger. He wanted to brutally beat him, to destroy him. But before these thoughts went any further, he calmed himself down. As much as he wanted to continue those thoughts, they were dangerous. They reminded him of what happened back in the Wave Country. Though his grandfather claimed it would take years to control these emotions, he needed to learn to control the Biju inside him in order to better protect everyone, especially Hinata, from its wrath. For the most part, he was kept under control by those thoughts of the Biju inside escaping. He wished to not have it run free to cause death and destruction with all that hatred that it holds within. He grinned down at Slime's sleeping face, a creature Sakura had given to him earlier when he was leaving the tower. He knew Sakura was hesitant to give him up because she had grown attached to him during his time apart from the group, and he was appreciative of her taking care of him. When he woke up with Benitora in his face, he was initially terrified, but he knew he was in good hands with Benitora tending to him. He didn't know what had happened to his team, but he knew that he was in good hands with Benitora taking care of him. Even though it wasn't brought up, he reasoned that if they survived, his teammates would have shown up at the tower, which they had, and if they hadn't, they would have failed the test or something had gone wrong. After the few nights he'd spent around it with Benitora by his side, it was sheer luck that they'd crossed paths at all. Nobody dared approach them, not with his friend's enormous form hovering over him. He was startled out of his reverie by his grandfather's familiar voice. How is she? He turned to face the old man and noticed the serious expression on his face before turning back to Hinata. The boy, his fists clenching from the memory, explained, the doctors say she'll be fine, but it was a very close call. What Neji did was uncalled for, even if it was part of the Chunin exam. Come. Let us go home. Your uncle is waiting for us, the elderly man said, nodding. Gramps. Is he really my uncle? Naruto asked Hinata before crossing the threshold, getting up and taking her hand. He then promised to come see her again before leaving the room with his grandfather. The elderly monk clarified, not by blood, but he knew your mother very well, as they left the hospital. Why is he going to train me rather than Kakashi? Sensei. Karase gave an explanation of Sasuke's predicament and the reason his sensei had to be removed temporarily for his personal safety. In addition, Jiraiya. Dono is an excellent instructor who studied under Hiruzen. Dono and instructed the Yondaime Hokage. To be honest, Kakashi freely acknowledged that I performed too well with you. Naruto cast a sidelong glance at his grandfather and noticed the sly smile in the twilight. He says that the only things that you really need to work on are jutsus and to gain some experience, which Jiraiya Dono will be able to accomplish for you with ease. So I'm going to pick up some skills? Do you think Jado Nissan can show me anything else as well? Okay, let's get the show moving. Karasu nodded on both counts. For what he did, I genuinely want to give Neji the thrashing of a lifetime. No one, and he really means no one, hurts his best friend like that and gets away with it. Oh, how he can't wait to repay the Hyuga 1,000-fold for what he did to Hinata. After he's done with him, what the boy did to Hinata will look like a walk in the park.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.